Welcome to The Audience Connection. This is the podcast where we focus on how businesses can create content that builds more genuine connections with their audience.
Each episode, we dive into the art and science of storytelling, speaking with the sharpest minds in brand, marketing, and creative storytelling.
Our guests share their strategies, insights, and creative choices that made their audiences care.
Brought to you by Casual, the video partner for global brands. With offices in the US, EMEA, and APAC,
Casual leverages the art and science behind creating impactful stories to drive business results for their clients.
we're your hosts. I'm Lydia Chan.
And I'm Ollie Atkinson. This is The Audience Connection. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Audience Connection. Today's episode is a really exciting follow-on from our chat with Dr. Paul Zak. So if you remember, Paul's work focuses on what's happening in the brain when we're emotionally immersed in a story.
Yeah, and today we're talking to the other half of that equation. Your guest today is Dr. Christopher Demetrakos, who's the founder of Act3. And his work looks at what has to happen before that emotional response and how to design creative that actually triggers it in the first place.
Exactly. So if Paul measures immersion, Chris measures resonance. And they're the two sides of the same coin. And when one tells you when the brain fires, the other, and this is the really exciting bit, tells you why and how to design for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating stuff from whiskey ads in Japan to the neuroscience behind storytelling and behavior change. Chris shares how brands can design work that audiences don't just like, but they act on.
Yeah, I mean, this is truly groundbreaking, and I would advise going back to listen to Paul Zak's episode before if you really want to understand the immersion side of it, because we do touch on that. But if you've ever wondered how to build creative that genuinely changes behavior, this one's for you.
Yeah, for now, stay tuned. Here's Ollie's conversation with Dr. Christopher Demetrakos.
Hello and welcome to The Audience Connection. Today we're joined by Dr. Christopher Demetrakos, a cognitive neuroscience and founder of Act3. Chris's work combines neuroscience, psychology, and AI to move beyond clicks and impressions and instead engineer campaigns that truly resonate and drive action. I'm so excited to unpack all of this. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ollie. Happy to be here.
So as the way we kick off this these episodes, we talk about who is your audience, who are you trying to connect with? But I'd really like to know from you how your journey into neuroscience, because you're from an Adland background, right? Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are.
Yeah, sure. Not just Adland, but kind of a weird Adland background. So in the 20th century, as I understand it, no one's done the archaeology on this yet, but a couple of Western guys were allowed into Dentsu Tokyo in the entire 99 years that Dentsu was in operation in the 20th century, and I was one of those guys. And so other one was there for I think he was there for about a year. I was there for 13 years and did M&A for quite a while, and then moved into mainstream advertising. I can tell you, we can talk about cognitive profiles as well. So, I can just straight out of the gate tell you that I'm a low agreeableness person, and that doesn't mean that I'm a horrible human being. It just means that I'm often checking what's around me in my world against what I interpret to be good for me. That's low agreeableness people don't immediately go with the crowd. High agreeableness people tend to do that. And so, given this, I started asking a lot of hard questions. And during the M&A period, for example, we bought 15% of Publicis. And Maurice Levy, who was their longtime CEO, he would come to Tokyo fairly frequently. And I remember one day I asked him, what is a strategist? What does a strategist do? Because I could not get a straight answer out of anyone. And he couldn't really tell me. He says, they do strategy. And I said, okay, fair enough. And then the head of Dentsu Young and Rubicam was a brand new president of DYNR, and I posed the same question to him, because often he was American, and obviously I'm American. Here we are in Tokyo, so they would pair us up, and send us off. What is a strategist? And he's like, well, they think stuff up and they coordinate. And I mean, it took me years, about 7 years to really understand what a strategist does, because strategists don't, in the Western sense, don't really exist here. And so I thought, you know, I became a pretty heavy contrarian. I thought, what are we doing? Right? What are we doing? And then the big buzzword, we've gone through a lot of buzzwords in the last 20, 25 years. Back then it was value added service. And I said, great. I'm young, brand new to advertising. What's the value add? And he looked at me as if I had just
What does that
uttered
mean?
the
Yeah.
evil words. And he said, well, our service is better, of course. Okay, sure. Got it. Better. Yeah. So, through all of this, I started asking more and more questions. It snowballed, and I thought, "What are we doing? Are we selling anything that's even remotely legitimate?" And so, at the end of my career, I pitched a cell phone maker, an Android maker, and they were entering the Japanese market. Uh, Won it with a single presentation. By then I could just do the pitch in my sleep, and they gave us for the first campaign they gave us $5 million. And so I had been in movies, in the movie industry on the Dentsu side for quite a long time, number of years. So I called up my friends over at Paramount and said, "Hey, what do you got?" And "Oh yeah, we've got Captain America coming out." Great. Okay, so we tied up with Captain America, pre-installed a Captain America trailer on the phone and all this, and basically made commercials that were, it was Captain America with sandwiched by product shots, 15 seconds in Japan. And by all measures, the campaign was great. But they wanted to sell 5,000 phones nationwide. Not a big goal. For $5 million, for $700 phone, already the math isn't working out, okay? And they we didn't even get halfway. And that was when I drew the line. I thought, "Wow, something is seriously, seriously broken." And so I founded my current company on the question, how do we get decision from consumers? Unequivocally, absolutely, not like, oh, make something they like or make something high impact. Oh, or get the deep insight or any of this kind of fluffy common wisdom. See, here's my contrarian coming out. None of that. Like, what is the science? Like the gravity, as dependable as gravity, what's the science? And you just interviewed my colleague Paul Zach, and we're two sides of the same
Yes, I
coin.
did. Yeah.
Okay. I remember the first time we met. We were talking, he was saying, "Hey, I've got this immersion stuff, and 20th Century Fox will send me 3 trailers, and here we just have the kids fire up the phone, connect it to the watch, and they just watch the trailers and put the phone down, collect their money, and it's done. No questions asked." I said, "That's brilliant. 2 problems." Anyway, I knew it. I said, "First problem is it doesn't consider the variance across the population. Everybody's different. Oliver, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, not your favorite movie, but one of your relatives loves it.
How did you
Pay
know?
attention." Okay,
Yes, yes, that's true.
right?
That's true. My
Everyone is
father-in-law, yeah.
different. Everyone is different. And so the second thing is that it doesn't tell you what to make in the first place. Show me any report from Kantar, Ipsos, Nielsen that says you should make exactly this. You won't see it. It's all, hey, here's generally the, what people like, and you have to interpret and kind of go through this, all these machinations of what you think and they think. And when we have consensus on liking, then it's like, well, everyone seems to like it, so then if we like it, then everyone else will like it. No, 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 no. We tell you exactly what to make. Exactly, exactly. So Paul's side of the coin is a prognostic tool. He says, yeah, this thing's going to fly or it won't. Immersion will tell you, are there the neurochemicals in the brain happening? Oxytocin and dopamine. Our side is, in order to get that dopa-oxy release, you have to have a message that is cognitively resonant. That means it's aligned with their cognitive traits. And if you don't know their cognitive traits and you're just guessing, well, that's Gen 2, Generation 2, right? I'll tell you that in a second. Okay, so you need to know their cognitive traits, and the simplest examples that I use, I just basically stick to big five, um, which is ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. So extroversion, introversion, extroversion, your high E or your low E. You're an introvert, you're an extrovert. What does that even mean? Oh, well, you see this in popular culture. It's like, I'm an introvert, I need to recharge. You don't. It's only about dopamine. Okay. Introverts get a much, much larger release of dopamine in any given social interaction. Extroverts get a smaller release of dopamine. Everybody needs social interaction. Paul talked about that too, right? That's 50% of the right, the indicator of our health and
Yeah.
well-being. So we need social interaction. It's just an introverts.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, okay, we are much happier with a smaller piece of cheesecake. The extroverts need a bigger piece of cheesecake. That's the only difference, right?
Is it as clear cut as that? Because some people say like, "Oh, I'm an introvert, but I'm also an extrovert." Can you actually categorize it that clearly, or is there a sliding scale between the two?
Again, depending on your environment. So
Yeah.
basically, you are
Okay. Okay.
the general rule is that you're 50% determined. So you'll see this in pets. Okay, great example. I don't know if you know there's a channel called A Dog Named Stella, this golden retriever that dives into huge piles of leaves. So Stella has there's another dog called Mabel, right? And this was I saw this video and it was such a great illustration of this, of openness. Okay, now, openness is openness to new experience, like high openness. They're very adventurous people. They want novelty. Okay, so they're seeking out stimulation quite a lot. And so this even applies to pets. Stella goes tearing down to the lake shore, dives right in without hesitation. Mabel skids to a stop right at the shore and watches, right? Oh, bingo. Okay. Right.
That's my dog. I've got a golden retriever, and that's my dog. She will not go in. She wants to doesn't like it. Doesn't like not extroverted at all. Yeah.
So she's on the lower end, or he or she is on the lower end of openness, right? Um, So and then, socializing, I mean, dogs are generally social, but you'll see dogs, there'll be variants within dogs as well. Some of them kinda hang to keep to themselves. Others are like, "Yeah, come on, let's go. We need to play and get this going." So, but, uh, anyway, yeah, so we went down the divergent path. Where were we? What were we talking about?
I think we were talking about marketing to dogs. No, we were talking about the different identifying the introverted and extroverted.
Right. Okay, okay. So it was actually the 2 sides of the coin. So I was illustrating that if you are in alignment with the cognitive traits of your audience, then you can engineer cognitively resonant messaging. You can make, and so this is the whiskey case that you were talking about that we did was, of course, it's every brief you've ever seen, every luxury brief, every spirits brief. It's like, people, well-to-do people who dress exceptionally posh drink our whiskey during moments of togetherness and celebration. Well, naturally, what else would it be? No, actually, no, not at all. In fact, here in Japan, uh, they said women don't drink whiskey. 30%. Okay, 30% of their audience is female, over 40. They get a bottle, they go home, and they have a wee dram on their own, right? By themselves. And so because of that assumption of the brief that came from headquarters, everything was extroverted. Everything was, the scene was the really nice bar and all the rest of that. What we did was we figured out that more than half of their audience were introverted. And we said, "Oh, wow." I mean, that's a huge read, more than half. So we immediately uh, shifted gears. We didn't get any media budget at all. They said, "Can you do anything without a media budget?" And I said, "Watch. Yeah, sure." And so we got micro influencers and we paid them with a mini bottle. That's it. We sent them all just a mini bottle of whiskey that cost, a couple of quid at the pharmacy. So and we said, if when you're taking photos, if there's a person at all, it can't be like a whole person and definitely not multiple people. And revenue went up by 56% in 3 months. It had been flat for 5 years. And that's what happens when you align with their cognition, because first job is to get into the brain. There's something called your RAS. It's your filter of the brain. Brain doesn't have the horsepower to process everything. So it lets in a tiny fraction of reality. Get in the brain, then we're in Paul's territory now. Trigger the dopamine, modulate by oxytocin, and then you get action. So the decision is made.
That thing about the RAS you talk that is fascinating because it's effectively like an ad blocker in your head. And can you talk a bit more about like how we haven't almost known about this or used it, before? Because it does mean that there's a lot of money being spent on content and storytelling and that isn't going in, or creative that's just not effective. Why have we not got to this place where we can understand that this is not not being effective?
One reason is the if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay. And this actually uh I have the reasons why it's been such a difficult journey for me personally and building this company. It's because marketing people my huge miscalculation was that marketing people wanted a solution, and they don't. They don't. So first of all, if you're not if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? It's like, oh well, we do what we do, and we take commercials to con, and some of them win. And see, look, I've got this award, and can't you tell by my blue hair and expensive eyewear that my connection to the creative unconscious is stronger than yours? There's all this, literally this lore that's built up. I was a creative at Dentsu, right? And I couldn't, on creative days, it's like you don't wear a suit, you have to wear the uniform, that says that you're alternative. Yeah, naturally. So we've always done it this way, so it must be the right way. And if you're not looking, and if you're not a contrarian, and you didn't have the unique experience that I had. I mean, I was just a young guy at the top levels of the biggest ship in global advertising, rubbing shoulders with all these, big shots, from Madison Avenue, and, like I said, from Europe and from all of Asia. And I was asking all these questions. And at the same time, we're talking about strategy and advertising and all the rest. And so it was quite an education. And that made me a contrarian. And I asked the question. But literally, like advertising, and forgive me, people really lambaste me for this, but it's a religion. It's an ideology. And if you, if you question, like for example, when I was one of my first creative meetings, uh, the creative director, right? So naruhodo in Japanese means I see, right? If someone says, "Hey, I've got this idea. Here's the idea," and the CD, he'd sit over there like a samurai. He'd sit over there and he'd say, if he said, naruhodo, that means he's not really interested. But if he went, oh, naruhodo, that means good idea.
That's so British. The whole thing is say, yeah. It's like it's like saying you don't agree with something. You're like, yeah, it'll probably work.
Yeah, island nation. So, getting back to how did we miss this? It's similar to another analogy that I like to use is, Copernicus. Here he is, what was it, 17th century, right? Mid 17th century. He's talking to farmers and saying, by the way, the sun is not in fact flying across our sky. We are flying around the sun, and they look at him like he's absolutely nuts. Okay, or I mean, even literally anything, electromagnetic radio waves. Okay, here's somebody who's never experienced a radio before, and they want to open it up and find the little guy inside who's making the music. And so, how does that translate to what we're talking about? Is guess what? Paul said 99% of your cognition is non-conscious. I generally tend to that's more Kahneman. Zaltman at Harvard will tell you it's 95. So it's between 95 and 99. It's non-conscious. We don't have access to it. We can't see it. Paul talks about that at length. Please, everyone, please check out that episode. It's great.
Yeah, go back and listen to that episode. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really brilliant. Okay. Um, by the way, full disclosure, I'm a research a visiting scholar in Paul's lab, just so anybody knows. Okay, so given that all this is non-conscious and we can't see it, we don't have access to all of this, and our decisions and all the mechanisms that go into decision and action, bubble up through this cognitive bias layer cake into the 1% that's actually conscious. We think that that's all there is. We think that we're looking our frame of reference and there's a sun flying across our sky. That's all there is. But in fact, there are radio waves and Wi-Fi and all this stuff that we can't see that our sensory organs are not able to perceive at all. And this is one of them. Okay. So just like radio waves, we have this non-conscious mechanistic machinery in our brains that are determining our actions. I'll give you an example. Okay. Here's Oliver. Everyone, here's Oliver. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Oliver. He wants to work out and he wants to go to the gym and he promised himself he's going to go to the gym every Saturday morning. But in February, in February, here it is, it's Saturday, and he's like, "Oh man, it's cold. If I get out of bed, it's so cold. It's so cold. Oh, I just don't But then someone else in his brain says, "But you made that promise to yourself. Imagine how you're going to feel when you don't go." And then the other voice says, "I promise I'll go next week. Next week. Just this one time, it's just so cold." Who's having this conversation? The survival part of your brain that's bubbling up is saying, human beings survive when we stay warm. And that part of your brain that's responsible for your survival is fighting like cats and dogs to keep you alive by preventing you from going
I've
out in
got
the
to
cold.
say, 9 times out of 10, it wins.
Yeah, right, right, right. You see, so that's why we haven't landed on this until now.
And I guess and we'll come on to this, I think, more later, but with AI coming out, I was talking to some researchers over in Singapore, and they're saying that we're actually making great strides with AI surveys and the like, because you're removing that level of self-report now, and you're actually getting more honest answers out of people around how they feel or, what they're doing. But then what you and Paul are doing is another level again, because it's all measured, right? And it's actually in the chemicals. My one question around, because obviously Paul talked about the Diet Coke mango, twisted mango ad, and
Yeah,
how people didn't like the ad, but it was resonant.
yeah.
There's still this disconnect in my head around not liking something, and yet it's still changing behavior and making you want to do something. How does that work?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Again, this is going to harken back to the 99% that's non-conscious, right? You don't think about um, how you're going to get to the office. You just go. But every single change in direction, that's a decision, right? And if you ask again, Kahneman, you make 35,000 decisions every single day. And so how we perceive the world is going to be according to what we know already, our experiences and how we interpret those things. There was a movie, and I always forget the name of the movie, and it was like 20 years ago, won Best Picture. The story was that an African American kid in a bad part of LA, his mom, he was just about the age to join a gang, and his mom decided, yeah, no, don't want my son to be part of that world. So she moved to a different part of Los Angeles. And the next scene was he's with a group of, mixed race friends in a much better neighborhood, and a car pulls up right in front of them. And this kid goes over, there's a little wall on this park. He goes over the wall and he takes cover. And the friends all look at him like, "What's wrong with you?" Right? But his brain, which is we have a prediction engine, and that prediction engine, based on his experience and what he knows, this was clear and present danger, and survival is now at risk. And your brain, Lisa Feldman Barrett talks at length about this. I encourage everybody to go out. Like there are no circuits for emotions. We can get into that too. But okay, your brain is constantly predicting what action to take next, based on what it knows, based on environmental stimuli, and it's constantly filling in the gaps. Right? I'll give you an example. There's a great optical illusion where it's a Coke can and it's got these kind of green stripes, but you can see the can behind it, and everybody sees red. It's a red can, but when you zoom in, there's no red in the image. That's your brain filling in what it knows and predicting because it doesn't want to burn extra glucose because that's expensive. So this kid goes over the wall because he interpreted that as danger, right? So all this stuff is going on in a non-conscious way. You see the Coke Mango commercial, and here's this, I don't know, somewhat semi-sexy, gangly young woman in front of a yellow wall, and there's just something tribal and interesting and all that that resonates with that part of the brain you don't have access to. But over here with the Alexa commercial that was everyone loved, ranked at number one, and here are all these celebrities, acting goofy and doing their thing. Yeah, sure, it was most popular, but resonance, it was dead last. It was dead last. Okay, so liking is going to be according to who you are, what your experiences are, and what your desires are.
But that's interesting, that Alexa one, because that's full of celebrities, and that would suggest that that would drive behavior. People want to be like them, and
Yeah,
as a brand awareness piece, it's really quite interesting.
yeah,
And there's quite a lot of behavior science in that that would suggest it should work, but yet
yeah, yeah.
it's not immersive. It's not connecting.
We Paul and I actually had a conversation about that too, and it was too much of a good thing. It was really long, and it was the same repetitive stuff, just with different celebrities over and over and over, and you could have actually ended it after the first one or two, and the point
Right.
would have really been would be driven home, but, you know, resonance can absolutely drop off, but, as Paul said, when they test it for resonance, it was just like, yeah, no, crickets, absolute crickets. Okay, that's interesting. Not even like the parasocial stuff. Oh wow, here's somebody I like. But again, it's going to be on a curve, and that's important to point out is that there will be a slice of people who will absolutely resonate with that, but maybe not everybody. So that's why we take the approach where we measure an entire category and we find all these cognitive clusters and we'll market to every single one of them in a unique way. So there's like an overarching brand consistency, but that message is varied up in order to resonate with each one of them. So you can go after an entire category, not some cognitive conscious mind defined sliver of target.
And what are the category? You talk about category markers as well. What can you talk about what they would be?
Yeah, sure, sure. So here's another contrarian perspective. You have Seth Godin, in the Purple Cow, and you have to be different. And Byron Sharp is talking about salience, and you got to be different and differentiate yourself and all that. But the thing is that there's something that there is such a thing as being too different and being outside of the concept. Okay, again, we define everything, right? The Coke can, that optical illusion. We know what that is. That's familiar to us. And there's something called the mere exposure effect that said your great to the 10th power grandfather went over to a plant on that rock now known as the UK, ate it, didn't kill him. In fact, it nourished him. Mere exposure says, oh, wow, I'm going to remember that. Again, it's all non conscious. I'm remembering that and I will return to it. So mere exposure effect says that familiarity is good. And so when you have category markers, these are all the things that define the category. So if you say, here's the concept of basketball shoe, and you have a category of basketball shoes, generally they're going to be high top sneakers. That's a marker. Okay. When you're doing visuals, it should be a high top because that's familiar. People look at that and in a millisecond, they're like, oh, basketball shoe. And they know. And then you take the cognitive traits of the clusters. That's how you differentiate.
Right.
Okay. So the high openness people, you're going to use bold visuals and things, odd concepts and abstraction. And you can use, for high openness people, you can use, more challenging vocabulary, conceptual stuff, right? That says, hey, these are going to take you to the moon kind of thing. To the low openness crowd, those who clocked in low, oh, it's going to be like, you know, you play basketball and you need what you know. This is what you know, this is what you prefer, and these things will elevate you to the hoop, right? Just
Yeah.
really straightforward. Yeah.
And do you then, in terms of how you create your creative for that, are you really kind of investing more in that high openness category because they're the ones that are likely to sort of spread the word a bit more, or how is that often kind of balance out?
So the markers are how to be the same. The traits are how to differentiate and how to get through the RAS so that you get the dopamine and oxytocin, which leads to action with tremendous regularity and dependability. Okay. And so we want to validate that you can there we have our own methods. Obviously, Paul, since we're talking about Paul, using the immersion test to see if a certain members of a certain specific cluster are resonating with a given piece of creative. It's a great way to validate resonance. Okay. Immersion, resonance. We use resonance. He uses immersion. And then what happens is we're going to execute cluster 4 high openness, cluster 4 out of say 5. We're going to launch that on YouTube. And then once there is a measured response and then it starts to taper off, we'll switch channels. And then we'll take the high O creative over to Instagram. We'll run what was on Instagram over here on YouTube. We mix and match that way because the high openness people who are on YouTube now have a pathway for that because it got into their brain because it was resonant. Now there's something a little bit different where it's like, okay, wow, this is low openness, low agreeableness is familiar to them. It's a little bit different. It's not quite as resonant as the other one, but it still communicates to them because they have the pathway, the affinity, right? This is Bader Meinhof, right? You buy a Volkswagen Jetta, you start seeing Jettas everywhere, right? So what that's doing is that's building, I don't play basketball, but I know that Nike makes basketball shoes, of course, right? So it's building, Nike has a lot of real estate in my head, probably yours too. And so when you build out that neurological real estate, then the probability that they will choose you in any given situation for buying athletic wear goes way up.
It's a bit when I think about like how we talk to our clients and trying to prospect and trying to we always talk about it, and I think this is the same for any brand really, is being right place, right time. And we've always been like, "Ah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because the client will only need a video when they're ready. So how do we stay in their mind and be like, hey, casual, number one, we're the best, da da da, how do we stay there? And this is suggesting this is the way to do it, right? You create these
Yeah,
resonant and immersive, and then when it comes to that moment, you are the forefront of their mind because you're in there, yeah.
right, right, right. Uh, Super old model, stimulus organism response, Morabian Russell, 1974. Uh, R can be defined in with multiple parameters, but stimulus is it's a great way to think about this, about Gen 3 marketing, which is the cognitive era. Gen 1 is Mad Men, pre-digital. Gen 2 is what we have now, but it's all based on liking. It's all evaluated
Yeah.
by liking. Gen 3 says, okay, no, let's go after dopamine oxytocin. This is the cognitive era, and it's from this year onward. Okay.
So to
So
clarify,
Moravian,
Gen 2,
yeah,
with clarify, we're talking Gen 2, we're talking about uh, personas and the analytics that goes on afterwards, right? And just
yep,
why is that? And there's the self-report side of it, but the only other challenge I have there is like you've got these massive platforms like Meta, and they can predict behavior quite accurately through listening to some of these metrics on like such a large scale. Is that still self-report, or is that effective? Because they seem to be able to connect with lots of people in a very meaningful way,
yeah,
for good or for
yeah.
worse. But yeah, are we
That's
saying that
that's data
all of
science,
that doesn't
and that's
work?
playing the
Okay.
probabilities. And I like to think of it this way, Gen 2 and all of the math that goes into the prediction, it's like that old yarn about Robin Hood's arrow, right? And he shoots the arrow at a tree, and if you cut the distance in half every time, it's like Half-Life infinitely, it'll never reach the tree because you keep cutting the distance in half. It'll never get there. But everybody knows it gets there. Everybody knows that the arrow embeds itself in the tree. So when you look at Gen 2 and you say, well, people are this way, and we've found that this works better than that. And we A/B tested this green button over this blue button, and we found that 53% of the audience clicked here, the green button. So what happens? You change all the buttons to green. Well, what about These guys. What about the 47% you just alienated, that you just cast off to your competitors, right? So that's a huge difference in terms of going after this cognitive mechanism. But the math is still very useful because the math, again, it's the difference between lead measures and lag measures. Okay, analytics is a lag measure. It tells you what happened. It doesn't tell you why. But knowing that, oh wow, introverts clicked on the blue button or the green button, and extroverts clicked on the green button, blue button, whatever, doesn't matter, right? Then it's like, okay, wow, when they log in, we can actually execute personalization. Everybody says, "Oh, personalization." Is that is there more to that than putting your name at the top of an email in your CRM, right? We can actually execute some serious personalization here because we know that Oliver is an introvert and introverts click on the blue button, so we're going to tailor it that way. And it becomes a cognitive experience. So they really do work together because the cognitive portion, that's the lead measures. We know who they are. We've measured. Okay. We've measured. So we know that Oliver is introverted. What did he do on the website? Okay, those are the lag measures. There's the analytics. So they work together.
Right. Got you. Sorry, that's really helpful to understand. Let's move on to Gen 3 then. How's that different to Gen 2?
Yeah, everything understanding, the definition of Gen 2 is important. So, you go
Mm.
through, it's like the agency people will say, all right, we've come up with these ideas. Here's the general structure of the campaign. Um, I've only worked for Dentsu, so I don't really know other agencies that well. But we would take 5 ideas over, and we would say, "Here they are," and the client would always complain and say, "Well, which one of these is best?" And then we would always go back and say, "Well, you're the steward of the brand. You should know, okay?" Because you know why, okay?
Five ideas as well. That's a lot.
Sure, we end up with 1 or 2. I mean, and it's also the decoy effect, right? Whereas if you have some that aren't so good, then you're gonna lead them to these 2. You think those are good anyway. Okay. So it's like, okay, let's develop these. And then we basically go around and measure liking. Did Oliver like it? Did the client like it? Did the creative director like it? Seems like we all like it. Client likes it. So let's send it to a focus group and see if they like it. And if they like it, again, this is all conscious mind liking. And the focus group kids are getting paid $80. Yeah, of course they're going to say they like it because they're getting paid.
And there's conformity bias going in there as well. So if
Totally.
the big boss likes it, everyone goes, "Oh yeah, I actually quite like it."
Yeah, exactly. The conformity
Yeah,
studies are brilliant. We can talk about those too.
yeah.
But then once everybody agrees that they like it, and we all sit back and say, well, if we all like it, then everybody's going to like it. And so you put it out there. Now, here's the big leap of faith. If they like it, does it mean they're going to take action on it? The Alexa Coke Groove example says no, no, no. Or the whiskey case that we were talking about. I mean, we've got a lot of them. The whiskey case that we were talking about too. It's like, well, it's not even really a matter of liking. It didn't even get in the introverted brain. They didn't even see it. It was invisible. It was invisible. Okay. So that's, Gen 2 is all it's the cult of liking. And liking is not any indicator at all. It's not a barometer for action, which raises the next question, which is what is the purpose of advertising? Then you get into like Les Binet is talking about, 60/40 and, all this stuff and long-term brand building. You can't, you're really not going to get effects until way down the road. It's like, we don't have that kind of time anymore. That was all well and good during the Gen 2 era, but we're not there anymore. Okay. So the purpose of advertising is blood to a body is revenue to a company. If you have a perfectly healthy body with perfectly functioning organs and you remove the blood, it dies. If you have a perfectly healthy company with happy employees and shiny equipment, you remove the revenue, that company dies. Revenue. Revenue is the purpose. It is the raison d'etre. Okay. And so our job, before digital, the CMO was called the vice president of revenue. And so our function, our purpose is to create revenue. And everyone says, oh, well, that's performance marketing. No, 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 no. When you're in the cognitive era, that's how every customer ever in the history of capitalism was ever created. We just didn't know it. We just didn't know. But now we do know, and now we can aim at that, and it accomplishes your branding, it accomplishes your decision, it accomplishes your purchase all in one motion. So that whole argument just goes away.
And if I put that on with the lens of, the type of work that we do, uh, as well as purchasing, it's all behavior change, isn't it? So if we want to attract the right sort of grad, or if you want to influence specific thought leadership into a specific audience, you're becoming more memorable. You're actually getting that message across rather than just shouting into the ether.
That's right. That's right. Or getting somebody to vote for one candidate over another.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so what in terms of once we've kind of identified our audience, we've got that how do we use that? So you're kind of creating a dopamine architecture, are you, in your resonant creative? How do you create a creative that hits all the beats?
So we know that the brain is wired for story structure. And we know that that story arc is very meaningful because it does keep our attention. It's like, oh, here's the normal world, and then but something's not right, and then you go into the deep underworld, and something changes, and then there's all kinds of adversity. You find the goddess, and have you change because you go through the montage of training, right? And then you hit the greatest third act twist ever in history when you just as you're returning to the normal world, I am your father, right? And then you go, kill the Death Star, and because you've returned to the normal world, but you're changed. Okay, so there's story arc. Now imagine if we'll stick with the big five. Like there are hundreds of cognitive traits. We Acts 3 has identified all those that are germane to customer creation. And that's we generally refer to marketing as customer creation because marketing carries with it or advertising carries with it so many connotations. So now we have a story arc, and now we have pick high neuroticism. Okay, so neuroticism is how strongly you feel negative emotions. And if you feel those negative, really, really strong negative emotions, then that's where, for example, fear of missing out comes in. We've run into big, big research agencies uh, that will go out and find people who have zero affinity for the product. We had an alcohol uh, project that we were doing, and 44% of the audience reported being non-drinkers. What do you what do you do, right? I mean, it's like, wow, really? Guys, okay. So we do the affinity test that says you're giving us some indication that you consume alcohol in one way or another. Hopefully, our category of alcohol. Okay, great, sure. And then with this neuroticism, it's like, well, here's this very special thing, but it's very limited, and we're only going to offer it to this, and this, and this is going to run out immediately. So you better take action now, right? So someone who's high in neuroticism will absolutely respond to that, assuming they have an affinity for the product. Yeah. And so we go through each of the clusters, identify these dominant traits, and then there are sub traits as well. Then Acts 3 actually outputs a mood board, copy examples, and it says, here's the look and feel that you need to be going for. Here's some examples of context and situation. Here are the markers that are built in that define the category. So be sure to include those. And here, given their high openness, you can use this heavier, more abstract vocabulary. And here are some examples of that. And so then we'll just riff on those, come up with some on-brand examples, resonance test, and then, it's like winning before the first shot's fired.
You're away. Yeah. And I guess with AI, generative AI, we can test these things far more easily and quickly than we ever
Yeah.
could before. Have you started to see that? Have you had an experience doing that, or integrated
Uh,
AI in any way into the process yet?
it's a tough yes. Short answer is yes.
Mhm.
What we're seeing now is that uh, a lot of synthetic data is being pushed. Hey, we've got an agent that can create a million consumers based on a whole bunch of data. Now they can simulate these people. And what I've noticed is that agencies are using this to ask the synthetic people questions. How would you respond to this? And the way I like to think about that is inventing an internal combustion engine just so you can strap it to a horse in hopes that it'll run faster. Because you're doing Gen 2. You're literally thinking up conscious mind questions to ask to a machine that's going to simulate conscious mind Gen 2 answers, which do not indicate in any way, shape, or form how this decision is going to be made or whether they're going to take action or whether there's going to be the neurobiology that powers free markets. It's There's none of that. And back in the day during my Dentsu days, I had interactions with Sir Martin, who was founder of WPP, and uh, we had some interaction not too long ago, in fact. But you know, S4, like most agencies, S4, nobody is as embedded in AI as monks are. And I know those guys. I know Chris and I know Wes and all that. They are like the whole hog. We've gone
Yeah,
all
they
in on
they
AI,
they went all in. Yeah, yeah,
and they went all in. But the thing is that if you look at their stock price, it cratered,
yeah, yeah.
and
It was
they just
shocking.
announced layoffs as well.
Yeah,
So whether a human is making it or whether a machine is making it, Gen 2 is Gen 2. Gen 2 is still a
yeah,
best guess. Hey, synthetic people, what do you think? Well, we think this. Oh, well, let's interpret that and try to turn it into something creative. Let's ask these other AI agents what they would do. Oh, yeah, sure. You may have noticed, I think 2 Super Bowls ago, there were 2 commercials from 2 different companies that were almost the same, right? And it's like, wow, they clearly used AI for that. So that's what happens
yeah.
when, I mean, AI can still be Gen 2.
It's like that. Well, it's go back to what you said, isn't it? Like it's like Helios or germ theory and breaking out, but actually changing that mindset of what we're doing is wrong or the it's all incorrect. What we've been doing, and that is kind of well. I know you struggled with it for many years, like to sort of bring this awareness around. But
Yeah.
I guess the proof's in
So
the pudding, isn't it? Really, you just have to keep producing work that's resonant and changes behavior, and eventually people will realize.
and that may not happen. Um, as you and I have discussed, so my company, I can't talk about it, but my company, there's another company that has discovered the value of Axe 3, and there's some things that are in the works that again I can't really mention, but maybe a month from now, I'm not sure when this is going to run, but maybe it'll be out by then. But have you ever heard of The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn? It was written
I
in
haven't.
1962, and there are phases, like there's normal science, uh where, hey, let's find out what, let's go back to the 60s and the Mad Men, and maybe we can ask people questions what they think. And then there's like paradigms come from that. It's like, okay, well, now we have these surveys and these surveys are useful, so here's this body of generally accepted methodology. Okay, but then anomalies start to form, right? We start seeing anomalies where, okay, wow. Literally the last 10, 15 years in neuroscience have been a revolution. Like, we've discovered more in this period of time than all years previous. And so suddenly these anomalies start to appear. Paul did the work on dopamine oxytocin. I did the work, amongst many others. It's not just me, amongst many others, to say, "Oh, wow, this cognitive resonant stimulus is really a thing, and it's highly effective." All of these anomalies start to appear, and it's like, "Well, wait a minute. Sitting around with your expensive eyewear and having your connection to the creative ethers might not be the magic that we initially thought." Okay, so the anomalies appear, and then you go into the crisis phase, and then that's followed by a revolution. So think germ theory. Okay, think about Ignaz Semmelweis and hand washing before delivering babies, for example. That's a great one. Uh, and so many others. So then after the revolution, there comes a change in worldview, and then the cycle repeats. So we
Right.
are past the anomaly phase in advertising because everybody sees that, and everybody talks about advertising being broken. People love to do that on LinkedIn. oh, and they're hemming and hawing, whatever, right? And you get people arguing and they're banging their pots about, well, I use this statistical model to do this. And it's, again, it's the arrow that doesn't hit the tree. But now here we have this progression that had my company grown to be large and people adopted it, then yeah, it may have resulted in a worldview change. But I don't know what's going to happen with it. And I stopped talking about it
Yeah,
on LinkedIn. I mean, I have a YouTube channel, I have a TikTok channel, and I go out in the park and, I have a team, we make videos and it's fun and I dance around it, but I
they
don't
are
talk
they
about
are
the
a lot of
magic.
fun.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And maybe, like you say, if it's going to go a different way, maybe it's going to appear by stealth and sort of just start to kind of see these campaigns appearing, and yeah, it'll take a different form.
I think you and Paul actually hit on this too, where he was talking about some London agency that makes 100 versions of ads. Recently, Zuckerberg announced, hey, you'll be able to back your shop up to Meta, connect your
Yeah,
bank account, and the money will just flow. Leave the rest to us. Do you know what that's called?
completely. Yeah, I was at, I can't remember the name of it. You've mentioned it previously, haven't you?
Infinite ads.
Infinite ads. That's it. Yeah. And I was at this round table. I was at a round table with all the industry leaders on Tuesday, and that was the big fear, is like, well, look, Meta's going to come and eat everyone's lunch with infinite ads. So I'd love to get your take on it.
So once again, I don't mean to whip a horse, but the arrow not hitting the tree. This is infinite ads because it's just probability. It's let's throw a much, much bigger pot of noodles against the wall and hope that something sticks. Because we've got an infinitely large pot, an infinite number of noodles.
Mm.
We have the answer because we can take metadata. Wow, that really triggered my Gen X 90s web developer got metadata. Okay. So metadata, we could take data from Meta and be able to extract the cognitive traits from any given one individual person. And then, as we've also discussed in the past, the future probably only remaining role for humans in advertising moving forward will be this creative strategist. So again, think Pharrell at Louis Vuitton, who says, oh, wow, we have 5 primary or 6 or 7 or 8 clusters, cognitive clusters of consumers. I'm going to design templates for those clusters, and then we can have all the variables within any given template adjustable depending on where they fall on the scale of introversion, extroversion, whatever it is. So then the AI can actually fill those in. So it's a professionally done ad just with certain pieces and variables filled in. Oh, here's a template. They're extroverted. Ah, we put that extra person in there. Introvert, we take that person out, right? That type of thing. Um, and so you don't need infinite ads. You just need only enough for each given cluster. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it saves you, I mean, imagine the energy that it will take to process the infinite math of noodles against the wall.
No, it goes back to your thing about the RAS, and like, if you're throwing noodles at the wall, so much of that is getting filtered out anyway. It just seems
Yeah.
such a
Yeah.
waste.
Yeah.
Whereas you can create something that's more resonant and
Yeah.
connects. Yeah.
And each one of those impressions is so valuable now.
I'd love to go back to our kind of journey through Act 3. So we've come up with our creative, our resonant creative, that's sort of designed. And then we move on to, then we move on to the marker application, which we touched on previously, right?
So the markers will be part of the creative process where Acts 3 will say, here are the symbols, the copy, the words, the vocabulary, and then we sort those according to the clusters, right? So if you have phantasmagoria, that's absolutely going to be high openness, right? You're not going to show that to anyone else. Uh, I don't know why I landed on that one, but anyway, so then it's like, okay, the markers are here. Here's how we be this. Here's how we're the same. Now let's differentiate according to what those traits are. what the characteristics are for that given cluster. And that's going to resonate with them. It gets through in a millisecond, it'll get through their brain's filter, the RAS. And then it has the highest probability of triggering dopamine oxytocin, which would be in the next phase, which is validation. Okay, so we're resonance testing and validating that these are in fact resonant. Best way to do that is using immersion tech, because that smartwatch will pick up the patterns communicated through the cranial nerve to the heart, and then we know it worked or it didn't. Prognostic.
How many people do you think you need to measure to really understand whether it's being immersive or not?
35 minimum. A minimum is
Is that
35.
all?
Is 35. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Paul's lab, our lab, figured that out and determined that the minimum is 35. So a big Japanese agency sponsored some research that Paul and I did last year on Cannes Lions winning commercials. And you know, I mean, you know the result. They won awards. They won a platinum and a gold and something else. And then we tested for immersion in the cognitive clusters that ACTS3 turned up for those particular products. Absolute crickets, flat line, nothing. Right? It just, I mean, it's really unfortunate. Yeah. So again, you need 35, and in that case, I think we tested 100. You know, just to be sure. We got 100 people, gave them the cognitive tests, made sure that they were appropriate for the clusters that we were talking about for that product. And yeah, it was really fascinating. It's really fascinating. So like the Cannes Lions, the premier, you know, the
The
judges panel of Cannes
world
Lions.
industry. Yeah.
Yep, yep,
Okay, so we talked. I think you talked a little bit about channel stacking as well earlier on, and this is the final part of it, right? And this is where we're going to look at how you distribute and execute the campaign once it goes live. Can you just touch on that once more?
sure. So what we're striving to do again is, you know, we want to generate revenue, because that's the purpose of capitalistic business. And you want to grow and you want to be dominant and you want to be as big as you can get to deliver shareholder value. Now, the way that you do that is to capture a category, an entire category. You want to dominate your category. Maybe you're third place, maybe you're fourth place, whatever. You want to displace the incumbent. So we look at, again, what are the markers that define that particular category? And again, you know, the basketball shoe thing is a great example. Um, so in order to do that, the objective here is to create as many pathways in the brain as we can, as many associations, neural pathways. And we say, okay, hey, Nike not only does basketball shoes, they're very famous for basketball shoes because of Jordan, but they also, little known fact, make Bauer hockey skates. They own Bauer. You know, it's like, wow, that's in the Nike family. Hey, didn't know that. What do you know? Okay. So I mean, not since I was 10 did I play ice hockey, right? But I know this, okay? And so this just starts building out this familiarity, this mere exposure effect, right? That in the marketing world we'll call it brand awareness perhaps, but really according to cognition and behavior, here's mere exposure effect. Here's something that helps me survive and it enhances my status. And when I enhance my status, that improves my survivability and my procreativity, procreatability. I don't know, right? It enhances my chances of finding a mate and
Yeah, it makes it
procreating.
sexy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So all of that plays into this non-conscious mechanisms that are designed to uh, keep us alive and anticipate what's going on in our surroundings and pass on our genetics. Okay, because you know fundamentally, that's why we're here.
that's what we're hardwired to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you operate on that level, okay, you have the greatest probability of capturing as many people as possible. When you speak specifically to each cognitive cluster, you're getting through the most powerful ad blocker in the world, which is the human brain. You're getting into it and releasing that chemistry. Then the more concepts that once that initial pathway is built, you can introduce more concepts, you can have more associations, you can start building that out. It's like consistent message across devices, touch points, and whatever the third one is, right? Old school, Gen 2. No, 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 not consistent message, right? You're building that real estate out. Then you're on your way to dominating a category. That's the channel switching part.
It's so much more thought that goes in. I mean, so much more testing, thought, and science that goes into the process, right? It's going to be a longer process leading into this, which I can see there being a sort of frustration in how quickly you can launch this. Is it quite a quick process to go through
Yeah,
this, or how long would it take
yeah.
to identify these?
I mean, we used to. So in the movie, let me preface this with a question, Ollie. What's the difference between? Here's a trick question. What's the difference between marketing a movie, excuse me, for 20th Century Fox, or marketing, say, a soft drink?
Well, it's a tangible product that you're selling for a drink, right? Rather than an idea, a concept.
When you screw up the Coke campaign, you can beg for another chance. But with a movie, you got one chance and you can't screw up ever,
Got you.
right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So in movies, we used to, it was 8 months out, then it became a year out, then it just kept going further and further out. Ridley Scott came up with this amazing concept where he figured out that search volume was the one indicator of box office, you know. So he would
Right.
shoot 30 minutes of footage that wasn't even in the movie, only for to increase search volume. We had to do When I was working on the Coke account, we had to do an 8-month product launch. We had to shorten that to 3 months, which was nobody slept for 3 months. Uh, but this particular process, if it really depends on the client, we can get the analysis done in approximately 10 days. And then once we have that analysis there, because it reveals what needs to be done for every single cluster, we can literally wipe out the strategy in a meeting or two. And then it's like, okay, we ideate. And it's not, well, here's the creative guy. We're going to put more weight on his ideas or her ideas. It's if it's resonant and we can make the determination, the razor is resonance. Oh, it's in line with the cognitive traits and we can prove that it is, here's why. Okay, great. It goes into the testing slot, right? The queue for testing. And then
Hmm.
we will validate,
Yeah.
all these super ideas that everybody likes and went around the creative circles. Sometimes those fall absolutely flat, evidence the con lion thing. Okay. But we absolutely validate them first. And this whole process can take just a few weeks. If you have money to do the validation, bam, it can happen. It's just a matter of getting those impressions and testing for action.
Is there something around this scientific precision that leads to a kind of clipping the wings of the creative somewhat? Do you know, have you seen that at all? Like, does the creative freedom become restricted, or does it open it up in some way? Like when you're trying to hit these beats of immersion and resonance, does how do you like design your creative like that?
It's really going to depend on what you're making and the context. Okay. I hate it when people say that. It's like, do what's best for you. That's like the worst answer ever, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
the worst answer. Um, Paul did a project with Dove chocolate, and his videos up there, and that was with BBDO, and they didn't use X3. They were just using immersion, and so it was like idea. Let's test it with immersion, right? And then, oh wow, these don't resonate at all. Get rid of them. But this does, this element, and here's this ASMR and this sexy woman's talking and Dove chocolate and all that. It's really cool. It's on YouTube. You can check just Dove
Right.
chocolate, Paul Zach, and it'll come up. And
Okay.
uh,
Love it.
but so they had total creative freedom. Again, you want people to take action. So really, are you making art? Are you making things for people to like it? Or are you making it like the Groove Coca-Cola mango commercial to get people to take action and go buy? Which is it? So I mean, you do have total creative freedom, just make it introverted. It's not a huge ask. It's not shackles, right? Or here's how, we use perceptions of time perception. How do you see the future? How do you see the past? How do you see the present? How do you feel about these things? That's a really powerful indicator, right? It's not a shackle. It's just like, okay, you need to be creative, but in a future-oriented context.
I mean, if anything, I would think that actually putting some parameters around the
That's
creativity helps because you become
totally,
more creative when you've got some
absolutely,
restrictions,
yeah,
right? So, yeah,
that's right. It
yeah.
really does.
Okay, how can you see, so focusing on AI then, how can you see AI being involved with this type of, way of producing work in the future? How do you see that coming into play?
We use it. Axe3 is connected to several, and so we already use it now. But AI is going to get really, really good at uh, being able to. I mean, you've seen like some of the more recent Google Nano Banana just was released. That's, I mean, it's really incredible what's coming out now. What AI is able to do, and how precise it
Yeah,
is. Soon we won't be able to tell the difference. And so once you have, uh, someone said, I don't remember who this was, but someone said, the best, like sales is like seduction. The best ones you don't notice at all, right? And when something is resonant, I mean, you think about people say, oh, well, brand intimacy at scale. You're going to have this brand epiphany and you're going to have a branded experience. And like literally nobody thinks that. Okay. The moment that you choose and something's resonant and you make a decision, you're looking at this versus that. You're not looking at that anymore. You're looking at this and you go, uh-huh, oh, that's it. It all happened. It was like a
yeah.
warm zephyr just blew through your transom. Okay. Right? Literally that's the whole thing. That's the whole process. And dopamine just, you're like, uh-huh, okay, yeah, yeah, good. So there's your branded experience. AI is going to be especially powered with this cognitive read, which is a way to categorize people and identify who they are cognitively. But once you're able to align messaging and produce it in milliseconds, I mean, I hand the ball to you. Imagine it. There's Zuckerberg just
Yeah,
solved this
yeah, yeah.
problem. You don't need infinite
Yeah.
ads. You just need one. You should call it one ad.
And in terms of like, the agency landscape as we move into this world, I think we talked about this previously when we had our discovery call around, that there is a place for agencies in the middle of this process, to still champion creativity and be there connecting the two together. But what do you see? What's your vision of the future? Be careful, obviously, what we say, but like, what's your vision of the future of how if this does get picked up, how do you think it will change the landscape?
There's a role. I mean, we're still dealing with humans. We still, AI is not perfect. It's very highly, it's agreeable to a fault, right? It's a sycophant, now. So we know when that's happening, and that'll probably change as it adapts and gets smarter. But I think there's always going to be a role for agencies to manage, because AI is a tool like any other, right? Monks, they use it for Gen 2, but who knows? Maybe Publicis will, start doing Gen 3, aiming at the cognitive portion of customer creation. And then they become, they have their Marcel platform and they have, however many 80,000 people worldwide that essentially become consultants for, hey, small company, mid-sized company, large company, multinational, we're the stewards of your brand, right? And we're going to cultivate this, here's the business intelligence that we get from the machines that's saying, wow, here's the whole category for whatever they're competing in. Here's a big investment bank looked at us for this purpose. They wanted to know, it's like, okay, if we look at a category, can we tell why the number 3 player in that category is number 3 based on how they're communicating? And I said, yeah, of course, because here are the clusters, and if they're communicating to a sliver of cluster 4 and that's it, well, it's no surprise that they're not in first place. But then you look at the incumbent and you notice that their
Yeah,
communication is hitting more than half the audience Well, again, it's no surprise. And then they said, okay, could we invest in player three and give them your playbook? And I said, of course. There you go. There's the answer. So if you're an agency and you're sitting and you're looking at this situation and your client is number three, and you can see how people are communicating to the entire category, then, okay, boom, strategy appears. White space becomes very, very clear. And now you as the creative strategist go in and say, all right, here are the templates for every single one of these. Let's go capture them all in a very strategic way, getting the extroverts, getting the high openness people first, because that's where the ripple effect comes. Then you follow up, then you start switching channels, then you're building out all that neurological real estate.
Is in terms of that neurological real estate, is there a risk that if we move to that future, there's sort of no capacity left? It starts to become less effective because this is, everyone's been targeted in such a sort of incisive way that you actually end up being kind of, it's not as effective.
From a certain frame of reference, yes. From our current purview, yes. Texas A&M, the business school, came to Tokyo recently and asked me to speak to him, and one of their clever students said, "So what does Gen 4 look like?" I'm like, "Oh, good one. That's a good question." What Gen 4 looks like is your AI. So I was at, this is kind of, let's just say that I interacted with ChatGPT 7 that's not due to be released until 2029, and it was freaky. And they said, the people who gave me access to this said, we're afraid to release it, and maybe you can help us with our concerns about what this is going to do to humanity. And I said, happy to have that conversation for sure. But I did it through glasses. So Oliver's wearing his glasses and he's distracted suddenly. Why are you distracted? Well, survival, of course. Your brain is constantly predicting your environment. And then your glasses, through the little earpiece, they say, Oliver, it's Thursday. And on Thursdays, you usually have a burrito. Are you feeling up to it, mate? Right? And you're like, yeah, it is lunchtime, isn't it? And then your little,
I'm like, why is Chris doing an English voice in my head? What is going on?
right? And then it says, hey, you know what? 200 meters away, there's a burrito shop and they're offering you free guacamole. Oh, one moment. 230 meters away, there's one that's offering you some other deal, right? You get chips and this and that and blah, 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 tacos, whatever. Oh, one moment. We've detected another device ID in your immediate vicinity. The first shop is now offering you 2 for 1. So take yourself out of our current frame of reference and our purview as marketing people and put yourself in that frame of reference. That's Gen 4.
Yeah.
And it'll all happen in a way that's exactly in line with who you are, because these machines are going to become our caretakers. Already happening.
What does that do to our brain if that's what happens? Like, do we stop being able to have to make conscious decisions? And I mean, I guess it is unconscious anyway, isn't it? But I wonder whether that's taking something away from us if we are being looked after so much.
It can, but at the same time, if we're so optimized already. So was I was a walk-on on a university football team, American football, during my university days, and like we had to feed ourselves, and there weren't really any supplements. They were just kind of coming in at that time. Now the guys are fed, they measure every calorie, their vitamin profiles are customized. I mean, it's just unbelievable how optimized these bodies are.
Yeah, they're absolute beasts.
It's incredible. And so, in similar fashion, I think it's very possible for AI to help Ollie get out of bed on a cold Saturday morning in February and say, you know what? Your leg strength is down. I know exactly the way to motivate Ollie because I know who he is cognitively, and I know that if I offer him a reward here, or I offer him um, guilt over here, then I know that I can motivate him because his leg strength, which is, aside from social contact, which is the number one predictor of longevity. Uh, your leg strength is down. You need to improve this, and it's in the vested interest of Demerzel, to make sure that you are healthy and long lived.
Yeah, yeah. I can see how that would help. And I'm going to probably go off and do some squats after this recording. But thanks so much. It's been really fascinating to talk to you. I wonder whether there's one question we ask at the end, but I'd also like to know if, like, we try to make it actionable. And aside from getting in touch with you guys and sort of starting to run a campaign with Axe3, what's a first step you would advise a CMO if they're looking to change how they're producing work? If they were going to do something this week, what would you advise they did?
Number one, I would say watch this podcast. Watch the podcast with Paul Zak and embrace the physics, the neurobiology of how customers are created, because the tractor beam to Gen 2 is very, very strong. It's very strong. But that scientific revolution, Thomas Kuhn, is upon us. It's here. And there's no more, what's the ostrich effect. You can't put your head in the sand. You can't ignore it anymore. You need to completely change how you approach customer creation to obey these neurobiological laws. And once you do that, it's phenomenal. I mean, getting people over the line is Herculean effort. But once they're over, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe we weren't doing this before, you know? And that's how humans are, because status quo
Yeah.
reigns supreme. And so, I know that you ask people, it's like, okay, what's the ideal audience and all that. For us, it's an extremely high openness individual. The only people who have been receptive to our tech are extremely high openness. And then, they're astonished by it. But then again, we run into, well, it's disruptive. So it's been a hard, long journey. Yeah. That's what I would tell him.
Yeah, I am
Yeah.
fascinated to see how this unfolds. Yeah, yeah. We'll pass it on as well. So the only last question I have, and thank you very much for being on the
My
show. It's
pleasure.
been so fascinating to talk to you. Is we do an audience of one question, which is about you and how you create your work. There's obviously this idea, and I'm so interested to hear your response to this, but there's an idea that when you're writing something for an audience, it's useful to think of one person. Is there one person who influences your work or your life, or who is it you think of when you're trying to construct a paper or some piece? Who comes to mind for you?
That's interesting. Of course, I want this to be super amazing and everyone to say, "Oh, wow," and all that. But there was one teacher I had who was my high school English teacher. His name's Bruce Kilsmeyer. Best teacher I've ever had in my life. Made me think like no one else. And, English teacher, right? He used to have a sign in his classroom that said, "No defenestration allowed." And for those of you who may not be familiar with defenestration, that is the act of throwing someone or something out of a window. His classroom was on the second floor. And just, oh God. I mean, we still, when I haven't been to the United States in a long time, but every time I go, I make it a point, always made it a point to catch up with him. And so when I'm writing, I'm thinking, yeah, I wonder what he would think about this. Phenomenal guy. Yeah, the world needs more. One in a million. One in a million. Just so fantastic. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks very much, Chris. And I hope to get you back on the show again in the future, and we can talk about
Thanks,
how
Oliver.
this is all
Love
developed,
to.
hopefully.
Yeah.
But yeah, appreciate you being on.
Fantastic.
Speak to you soon.
We're out. Yep. Cheers. Take care.
Well, that's it for the audience connection this week. And what I love about this conversation with Chris is that it reminds us that resonance and immersion are not just creative buzzwords. They're actually a complete reframe of how we think about content. If you design for what people feel, not just what they see or hear or what they like, You move beyond communication and into actual connection. And that shift has the power to transform not just how we make video, but potentially how we lead, teach, and tell stories in every part of the business. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.